Good afternoon. The question is simple, really. The question is, how big are you going to live? How big are we going to live? And I ask that because we have unlimited potential, each of us, unlimited potential just with our thoughts to change our biochemistry, with our thoughts and words to change the biochemistry of others. And so what I want to talk about today is how powerful we are, and what are we going to do about that? The potential we have as a species, I believe, is staggering. Right? I've studied a lot about the mind-body connection, about what individuals have the ability to do. But when we take our potential and we combine it as a species, that potential is staggering, and the time to use it is now. So I thought I would talk a little bit about us as individuals, what you can do. And then we would talk about what if we combine all of that? What do we do for our society? What's the legacy we leave as a society? You know, if you think to yourself that I'm going to get up there and I'm going to give this great speech, or I'm going to go and I'm going to have this great performance, or I'm going to run this race, I'm going to win, then your biochemistry actually changes. If you tell yourself, I'm really worth it, I'm worth that person really loving me, then your biochemistry changes. And if, for example, you then tell somebody else, you were to say, well, you're really not that good at this, or you're really worthless, or you're really not going to amount to too much, you actually change the way that person processes. There are chemicals that they produce. They would produce adrenaline and cortisol instead of endorphins. So your words, your thoughts actually change not only your biochemistry, but other people's. We are powerful beings, much more so than we show. And I like to talk about how each of us has the ability to create health and to create illness, because that's what I see all the time, that we create health and we create illness. And I understand that health is multifactorial, right? There are a lot of different factors that go into the way we feel, the diseases we get, there are environmental factors, etc. But we spend far too little time focusing on what we each can do, how powerful we each are, and how our words and our thoughts can create dramatic change. And so today, this talk is about creating dramatic change. And I think, how are we going to, if we can come out of here thinking a little bit more, a little bit bigger about how we're going to harness that potential we have, then that would be time well spent. So I started my journey, really my professional journey, in many ways here at American University. I got my master's and my doctoral degrees, and I studied almost every discipline known to humankind. I studied the history of science, the history of spirituality. I actually studied the disciplines we study and how they evolved from mechanistic to holistic. And I studied what killed us: heart disease, cancer. I studied depression and chronic pain. And I studied what healed us, all aspects of healing. I studied the evolution of medicine over thousands of years. And what I came to is this understanding that we as individuals will only experience our potential, realize our potential when we are whole beings. You individually can only be healthy when you have your emotional and your spiritual and your physical, your social and your intellectual, all those dimensions developed. If you're really fast and you can bench 300 pounds, but you're an emotional wreck, then you're not healthy, right? Individually, we need to be whole. We have to understand the dimensions that make us up, and we have to connect them. Society is the same way. Our society is the exact same way. So if we have a portion of the social organism that is in survival mode, or that is suffering every day, that lives without food, for example, then we can never be what we ought to be as a species, right? So individual well-being is based on all the dimensions being connected, and societal well-being, the social organism, has to be connected. And that brings us to the first key word, and that is the C word: connection. Right? Connection is the key to how we exist as human beings. And when we understand that connection individually, we bring it out to the study of society, we realize that we are only as healthy as the least healthy among us. When we study the least healthy among us, which is what I did in my doctoral dissertation, I wanted to study, okay, what makes us healthy, and then where are the least healthy? And when you study the people who are the least healthy in society, you study poverty. And when we care enough about other people, and we care enough about how our society will go forward, then we have to dive headfirst into poverty. For one family after another, if we can solve the poverty that they endure, then as a society, we can realize our potential. But we can never be what we ought to be as a country, as a species, when there are those among us who can't be what they ought to be. Martin Luther King Jr. said that same thing, right? I can't be what I ought to be until you can be what you ought to be. And that's how we exist. I'll just bring up an example of diabetes. You all know somebody who's got diabetes, right? People in my social circles, many people have diabetes, and what they usually do is they take insulin, they take their medications. Whatever they do, their life is not altered by their diabetes. They just have to add something to it. 13 years ago when I started the Wider Circle, what I noticed first was that I would meet a lot of people who didn't have the bottom half of their leg, or they didn't have a foot, or they didn't have a toe. And I would say, well, what happened? And I'd say, I have diabetes. Almost everybody I met with diabetes had lost a portion of their body, which then led to losing a job, which then led to losing a home. When you're in poverty, everything is different, and everything is harder, and it starts at birth. Everything is different. It's a different world, even if it's just a mile away, and everything is harder, and it starts at birth. You know the number one reason people are in poverty? The number one reason people are in poverty is birth. Forget what you hear about people who just don't want to work, or they'd rather get assistance than get a job. The 15 to 20,000 people with whom I speak every year who live in poverty would give anything to pay taxes. Right? They'd give anything to make enough to pay taxes. So when I think about whether it's fair, whether poverty is something that it's okay if it's a few people or the poverty number goes down by 5%, we should celebrate that, forget about it. Right? Poverty creates for people a completely different world. And the number one reason people get out of poverty, the number one reason people will get out of poverty is support. I could give everybody I meet, every family that comes to a Wider Circle, I could give them all $10,000. That would not get them out of poverty. I could get them a house. I could give them a bed, a dresser, table, chairs, sheets, towels, dishes, pots, pans, blankets, televisions, coffee tables, couches, everything we give them every day. None of that gets them out of poverty. All of that helps. All of it helps, and that's why we do it. But none of that gets them out of poverty. But if I could give them you, that would get them out of poverty. Right? The number one reason people get out of poverty is support. It's other people caring. It's other people realizing that they are connected to those people who live in poverty. When you realize that, and you live big enough to claim that, then people have a chance to get out of poverty. I remember when I went to college, I had two parents and a brother and a coach. And both parents, my brother and my coach, said, you're going to college. Whatever else you want to do is fine, but you're going to college. And if I did not have that support, if I did not have that guidance, the short-term and long-term decisions I would have made would have been destructive. No question about it. But because I had that support and guidance, I went to college and now I'm an independent person. When you live in poverty, you are not independent. You're not free. You may live in a free country, but you're not free. You may live in a country that celebrates its independence, but you're not independent. But you can help them get there. You who have a job, you who pay taxes, you who are independent, you can be the reason other people get out of poverty if you will live big enough to connect to those people, if you will recognize the connection that you have to them and live that. I love the Aspen Grove. The Aspen Grove is a great metaphor for how we are all connected. And if you look at the Aspen Grove, it's different trees in different places, that tree over there, that tree over there, and it's kind of like this room where you're sitting there and you're sitting there and I'm standing here and we look like different beings, right? Different people in different places. But if you were to go beneath the soil of that Aspen Grove, you would find that there's only one root system. All the trees are connected by that one root system. And our feet may not go through the floor, but we are connected as well. For if we break down how we exist, human beings, it's as energy, right? Beneath the subatomic world, it's energy. We are vibrating energy. And the energy that defines us is the energy that connects us. So we are all connected. And I don't want to get too woo-woo for today. You're right, I do want to get too woo, but I won't. But that energy that defines how we exist is the same thing that connects us all. And when we can claim that, when we can understand that we are deeply interconnected, then we will no longer tolerate people living in poverty. We will realize that as one of us goes, so go all of us. It's not just a phrase, it's the truth. And only when we live small and think small do we not see that as one of us goes, so go all of us. I know. I like to use the story of an alien to describe what is going on in our nation's capital today and in many cities across our country. I know, not like that, though. An alien lands in the middle of Washington, D.C., and if that alien turns and looks to the left, that alien would see nice homes, families with a car, maybe 2 cars, kids sleeping in beds, clothes and dressers, all the sporting equipment they could need, closets full of clothes, cabinets full of food, and maybe the parents are arguing about, I don't know, there's too much clutter. We got to get rid of your stuff. And the guy says back, oh, I like my stuff. And then a month later, they do get rid of his stuff. But anyway, the argument is about we have too much stuff, right? And then if the alien turns away from that and looks in the other direction, the alien sees buildings that look like they've been neglected for decades, garbage strewn around the outside of apartment buildings. The alien would see the hallways of these buildings and smell the urine and the alcohol that is the scent in so many impoverished buildings right around the corner from here. Would see children sleeping on floors, eating on floors, clothes maybe in plastic garbage bags or maybe just on the floor, closets full of nothing, and cabinets only with dust and dirt. And the adults in those homes are as stressed as can be because when you're in poverty, you're stressed all the time. And they may be arguing, but they're not arguing about having too much stuff, right? They're arguing and fighting because they have nothing. And that alien would think, what is going on here, right? How do I process this? And that alien would leave and go back to its planet. And the alien would say, you know, that's unfortunate there because the beings who live on that planet must not have any eyes. Or if they have eyes, they must not have any hearts. Because how would they live with so many people, with so much stuff, and so many people with nothing? So many people with so much stuff on one side, and a mile away, so many people with nothing. That doesn't make any sense. And then the alien would say, you know, if they're trying to do something about it, they're going way too slow. Because every time one person gets helped, 10 more are born into that poverty. And that brings us to the other C word. And the other C word is commitment. Once we understand how connected we are, once we understand that when we look left, and maybe we are left, and then we look right, we have to do something about them, right? Because that's our brother and our sister and our mother, as I'll talk about in just a moment. We recognize our connection, that's great, but unless we commit to it, it doesn't matter. So I like when I think about the word commitment, I like to think about the woman who's on the corner asking for money, right? You always see that, and so many people, the discussion about somebody who's on the corner asking for money is, oh, should I give to this person? They're just going to use it for drugs or alcohol, right? And then you see a guy there, and you look at the same thing. Sometimes people will say, well, they make more money doing this. They don't want to get a job. They'd just rather beg and get the money. And those are the types of discussions we have. Or maybe you drive up to that person or drive up to that corner, and you hope, more than anything else, that she doesn't look you in the eye, right? You hope you can get away from that corner before you connect. Well, what if that person were your mother? That's what we have to think, that woman at that corner, that's your mother. And what would you do? How stirred to action would you be to end her poverty if that were your mother? I see people all the time doing all kinds of events and all kinds of causes to help people, but when people are in poverty and somebody gets shot because they live in poverty, or somebody shoots because they're in poverty, nobody does an event for them. No one raises money, not to the degree that we do for other things. But yet if you were to look at the number of people who live in poverty in this country, 50 million people, and if you were to understand the poverty line is about 24,000 for a family of 4, and you were to say, well, what if you go twice the poverty line? It's 48,000. 48,000 for a family of 4. Does that get you what you need? No way. Not in this region. Some places you get close. But that means that if you were to look at people who were 200% of the poverty line or below, 200% of the poverty line or below, you would be over 100 million. What would we do if there were a disease that affected over 100 million people in our country, we would be stirred to action. We would not stop. It would be a crisis greater than Katrina. So, what are we going to do about that? Because that's your mother at the corner, and that's your brother, by the way, who gets shot, and that's your brother who shoots, because the number of murders for people who are in poverty is astronomically higher than the number of murders for people who are not. Poverty is why kids shoot other kids, it's why kids get shot, and the same thing with abuse and rape. So that girl who's going to get raped tonight, because that will happen in so many impoverished neighborhoods, and it happens because of poverty. That's your mother at the corner, that's your brother who gets shot, that's your daughter who gets raped. Every city is like a war zone. And the question is, what are we going to do about that? You know, we can't walk. So many of us, maybe as a group, maybe not, but certainly any pair of you could not walk into much of our nation's capital at night. So many streets in our nation's capital, which should be the example of what is possible. Instead, it's an example of what disconnection brings. We could not walk in our nation's capital, and the only reason is poverty. I can't go visit most of the people I serve at night because it's not safe. And the only reason is poverty. Disconnection is why poverty endures, but connection and commitment are how we will end it. Connection with those in poverty and commitment to them. Not just contributing, but committing. Poverty is a raging metaphor for the lack of connection and the lack of commitment in our society. So when I look outside and I see those signs that say, what's our global future? I say that's dependent on the commitment we make to one another. That's our global future. And what will our legacy be? Will our legacy be to make poverty the next great social movement in our country? It has to be. Too many people suffer from it, and they suffer from it from birth. Our legacy is now. Right? What will we do when we leave here? Will we recognize our interconnectedness, commit to those with whom we share this being, with whom we share this planet? That's the only answer. And when we do that, when we connect with others, when we commit to others, and when we realize that potential that we have inside, that unlimited potential, when we tap into that, then we create what is possible. Thank you very much.